Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
For over 30 years, Jews around the world, especially in Israel, have been waiting for this announcement to come, and that is that Jonathan Pollard is now free and able to make aliyah or move to Israel. Today, we're going to be talking about Jonathan Pollard and the U.S. elections, and we're going to get two different views on that. Now, very interestingly, Jonathan Pollard, let me tell you a bit about him. He is a former intelligence analyst for the United States government. And in 1987, as part of a plea agreement, Jonathan Pollard pleaded guilty to spying for and providing top secret classified information to Israel. Now, get this. Israel was not an enemy of the United States. It was an ally of America. In the U.S.-Israeli relationship that was forged, the United States was supposed to give this information to Israel. But Pollard's supervisors withheld this information, which was critical to Israel's security. And so Pollard went and gave it to Israel and actually kept in spirit what the American people wanted, what the agreements were. However, for doing this, he was sentenced to life in prison for violations of the Espionage Act. Pollard is the only American, by the way, who has received a life sentence for passing classified information to an ally of the United States. Again, we're not talking about passing information to Russia or to China or to North Korea, but to an ally. And this information was in order to save that ally's security. In defense of his actions, Jonathan Pollard declared that he committed espionage only because the American intelligence establishment collectively endangered Israel's security by withholding crucial information. And again, Israel is an ally of the United States, and Israel gives information to the U.S. as well. Israeli officials, U.S.-Israeli activist groups, and some U.S. politicians who saw his punishment as unfair lobbied continually for reduction or commutation of his sentence. Now he is free. We'll be talking about this and the elections when we get back.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
All right, we're back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and we're talking about two different subjects today, but they're connected somehow, and that is, of course, the wonderful news. We've been waiting over 30 years for this to happen, and that is that Jonathan Pollard is now a free man and can make aliyah to Israel when he likes, and that is a wonderful thing. And also the U.S. elections. And Joe Biden, he is assuming that he is the president-elect. We shall see. We'll get the official results soon in the next few weeks, please, hopefully. And but in the meantime, he's building up his cabinet. And who is he going to be choosing for his foreign policy posts. Here to tell us more about that and all of this is Barry Shaw. He is the International Public Diplomacy Director at the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. His books include Fighting Hamas, BDS and Anti-Semitism, and 1917 From Palestine to Israel. They are available on Amazon or at the Stamatsky bookstores here in Israel. You can visit his website at strategic-israel.org. Welcome to the show, Barry Shaw.
Hi, Tamar. Nice to be back.
Good to have you on. All right, where would you like to start?
You spoke about Jonathan Pollard. Let me give you some background with regard to Jonathan Pollard. He was released from his imprisonment, home detention, if you want to call it that, which has been precisely 5 years. And before that, he was imprisoned for 30 years after his arrest on November 21st, 1985. Now, basically, he's a free man. But, let's consider what he went through. He was required to wear a GPS monitoring system on his wrist all the 24/7. He couldn't go far outside of his Manhattan residence. Whenever he moved out of range of the receiver, the transmitter acted like a GPS tracker and monitored his location. So when he stepped out of his studio apartment to go to Davenport or go for a minion and get some fresh air on Shabbat or Yom Tov, the battery would begin to drain, forcing him to choose between violating Shabbat and facing rearrest. So he's had a really tough time over the last few years. But the parole that he received is good news. Basically, it means he's free to go anywhere in the states he wants, but he needed a presidential pardon if he wants, for instance, to make Aliyah and come to Israel. And Trump has allowed him that, has given him that pardon. However, I believe that his wife, Esther, is receiving or trying to receive a critically important cancer treatment. And he's hesitating whether to come here or have the treatment in the States. And the last that I heard, that Israel, via the government, by the Ministry of Health, are making whatever arrangements that Esther Pollard needs to come to Israel and receive her treatment here. I want to point out a couple of things here. That first of all, Pollard, there has never been anybody who, if you want to call it spying for an ally, that has been in prison for 35 years. You would expect that if somebody had been spying for an enemy. And basically, what did Pollard do? Basically, Pollard was a UN Navy analyst. And at the time of the arrest, Pollard was said to be giving classified documents to Israel. But what was giving, actually, was essential, in fact, life-threatening information that Washington itself should have been passing to Israel and failed to do so. If the United States really looked at Israel as an ally and needing essential information. I'll give you one example, Tamar. Israel raided the PLO organization headquarters in Tunis in 1985. This was an operation that killed many top Palestinian terrorists, including the infamous Abu Jihad. In fact, the main target was Yasser Arafat, but unfortunately, at the time of this raid took place, he wasn't in the building at the time. And basically, this was declassified CIA documents released in 2012 that said that Israeli intelligence officer planned the raid based on information from Pollard. But this was information that the United States kept back from Israel. It should have passed it on to Israel as part of our intelligence and security arrangements. Now, the other issue I want to raise very briefly, quickly, was Pollard. Let's put it this way. The Americans haven't exactly been innocent on this. They kept Pollard as a pawn. They kept Pollard as a pawn on a couple of things. For instance, Dennis Ross said in his book he was kept as a pawn in order to force Israel to make some undue, let's say, withdrawals from Judea and Samaria. And perhaps if we had been good at that time, they would have, according to Dennis Ross, released Pollard. So basically, there's been some nasty work, if you like, and negotiations and tough talk by the United States and holding up Pollard as a tool. And there was another thing going on that was between President Bill Clinton and Netanyahu, that Clinton started pressing Bibi to agree to have a release of Azam from Egypt, and then Pollard would be released from the United States. Bibi said he was ready for that, but now it's your turn to release Pollard. But after Clinton called the CIA director, George Tenet, he came back and told Bibi that the release had been vetoed because Tenet threatened to resign if Clinton released Pollard at that time. So you can see the poor Jonathan Pollard was kept as a pawn basically by the United States.
And do you think that President Trump had anything to do with his parole release now, or it's just...
Yeah, no. The parole, it hit the deadline, and obviously
Right.
there has been pressure both from Bibi to America, the Trump administration, and the Obama administration before that, because he got nowhere with the Obama administration.
Right.
But actually, the deadline of Pollard's home confinement finished, and he was released on that day. And the news we got was that he not only was released from home confinement, but he was free to come to Israel. And that has to only come from presidential executive order. In other words, from President Trump.
All right. And do you think that he's was doing this in order to in response that he may not be the president? He may lose the election in the end, and that he wants to do this before he would be out of office?
No, I think that President Trump are doing one or two other things for Israel. We saw it with the visit of Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, where he visited Judea and Samaria and said any products coming out of Judea and Samaria will be labeled made in Israel, which is something that
as opposed to tell our listeners.
Radical left.
Tell our as
Raving.
opposed to.
Sorry?
I'm saying tell our listeners as opposed to if it doesn't say made in Israel, it would be said.
Well, we've always had this problem. I mean, we've had this problem with Europe for years, that products coming out of the Mishor Adamim industrial area couldn't be labeled made in Israel. And there was a lot of BDS activities going on for any Israeli factories employing both Jewish and Arab workers over there, which for instance, SodaStream went to the Negev, for instance. So we've always had this problem with this nonsense about labeling. We also had this nonsense, if you want to turn to people like Biden and Obama, who I think I mentioned in a previous show. The last act of Obama and Biden before they both left the White House was to stab Israel in the back at the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2334, where instead of vetoing any anti-Israel resolution in the Security Council, actually Obama, together with Biden, were active in making sure this was railroaded through. And instead of putting in the veto, they didn't put in the veto. Basically, that meant that the Security Council had announced that Judea and Samaria and even Jerusalem is, according to the United Nations Security Council, and therefore the General Assembly, illegally occupied Palestinian land. That was the final act of Obama and Biden before they left the White House. So it sort of reflects on what we may get if, God forbid, Biden becomes the next president.
All right. And so now we're looking at Joe Biden, who's building a cabinet. He's going on as if he is officially the president-elect. And what do you want to tell us about that? Well,
Yonah, whenever I come on to your show, I'd like to give some sort of original news and scoops. So let me start off by by giving you my prediction as to his foreign policy picks, all right? And I'll give you the reason why. Mark this down. I say that his next, if Biden becomes president, his Secretary of State will be Susan Rice. And when Susan Rice becomes Secretary of State, the next one would be the Biden choice for the United States ambassador to the United Nations will be Hillary Clinton. Now, why do I make these picks? Because people say that Trump, or people on the left would say that Trump is a crazy narcissist, including recently, just a couple of days ago, Barack Obama himself. But Barack Obama's released an 800-page autobiography. It's a book so heavy, I think you risk a hernia schlepping it home from the bookstore. And he's threatening to write another one. And
okay, hang on. Hang on, Barry. We got to go to a break. Hold on.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
All right, we're back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and our guest is Barry Shaw. You can go to his websites at strategic-israel.org and also theviewfromisrael.com. Barry, before the break, you were talking to us about Obama and his ego. You were saying that it affects Biden's foreign policy. How so?
Yeah, okay, so I've assessed this one, that I don't know if you recall, but even before Obama became president, that was 12 years ago, he made a prediction, he made a resolution, and he said that he intended to fundamentally change America. Right. I don't think the Americans really understood what he meant. I think now, a bit too late, I think the penny's dropped and they begin to understand what Obama meant when he was fundamentally going to change America. That was to take it to the radical left. Now then, why do I make the prediction that Susan Rice will be the Secretary of State and Hillary Clinton will be the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations? Because these two characters served Obama diligently for 8 years. And they will be there to prepare the way for Barack Obama to become the next Secretary General of the United Nations, because Barack Obama now has a greater ambition from fundamentally changing America to fundamentally changing the world. And I predict that Barack Obama will replace the current Secretary General of the United Nations when he finishes his office. I believe it's in just under 2 years. So these people will be in place, and that will be part of the Biden foreign policy to actually bring Barack Obama to lead the whole globalization movement from the United Nations.
Tell our listeners how the head of the UN is picked.
They have candidates and they have a vote, usually in a pre-committee, and then approved by the General Assembly. And the winner becomes the Secretary General. So I predict that Barack Obama will be the next Secretary General after Guterres.
All right. And what? He's going to push a socialist agenda, one world government, what?
Well, people haven't really noticed, But the last week, there was an international global Zoom conference about the new economic front. It was headed by people like Michael Bloomberg, but it included Bill Clinton, it included the World Health Organization, it included China, and it included a lot of the globalists who are going to change the world's economy, and they will be rooting the world. I mean, other people like Bill Gates and people like this were talking about we would have a need to go around the world with what he calls a digital signature. And he said later on we can have a conversation on what a digital signature means. Well, basically, a lot of people are quite suspicious of Bill Gates' connections with big pharma, companies like Moderna, for instance. And there's a deep suspicion of what, in fact, is included in the Moderna anti-COVID vaccine, because some suspect there is some sort of genetic engineering in there, and that would, in fact, become a digital signature. So you could be traced anywhere in the world. I mean, this is part of what I call the malevolism of the globalist agenda. Of course, the Green New Deal, and people have to surrender their rights to this, the national and the global agenda of things like Green New Deals and things like this. And basically, Donald Trump was the last bastion for that, last defense of that. And if he gets defeated, this will be ramroded through both globally and with the help of a Biden administration.
So for the people who say, I'm a good citizen, I don't do anything wrong, I don't care, let him have my DNA, let me have a digital signature, what does it matter to me? In fact, it'll help the world, because if we go to, if this even goes further to a cashless society, nobody can mug me in the street, take my money, et cetera, et cetera. What would you say to these people?
Well, these people are being naive, but naive as they were as for voting for a Biden administration, even locally within America, without being truly aware of what this means when the radical left take over the United States government and their rights, which they accept as a day-to-day thing, are suddenly deprived from them. A lot of them do it because they're quite shallow. They didn't like Trump's personality. They followed CNN and MSNBC and said the guy was a racist and rude and everything. So they went on what I call personality types instead of looking more deeply at what is going on in America. And I think once they make a mistake about that, they make a mistake of what's going on globally. If Donald Trump has gone, at least for the next 4 years, you will see a radical shift led by the approval of the Biden administration to get fully engaged with the globalist agenda. And you'll see a resurrection of China again. The Chinese representative in that conference made some statements that one would think would be horrific, because he was saying that a lot of the world, especially the Western world, put individual rights in front of collective rights. And he said that this has to be amended. Well, you and I know what collective rights mean in a regime like China or Russia or Iran. And this is to be feared, not to be celebrated.
And I just want to say a word about, also, I'm pulling this a little bit further than the needle here, but just to add to the remark about a cashless society, and, what's so bad about it is that they can basically shut you down, just as they're shutting down people with their speech on Twitter, on YouTube, on all of the social media that wants to do these things. They can shut down your bank accounts or your access to your money if they don't like what you're saying. And in fact, I think it was, I don't want to say the name of the company because I'm pretty sure it is what it is, but was one of these types of GoFundMe type places that after they had raised money for this person, they shut them down because they didn't approve what the money was raised for. I mean, this can really get out of hand. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, well, we saw this, of course, because I know I myself was affected by this, but I know quite a lot of people around the world globally whose voices and opinions were shut down by certain social media platforms, if you don't want me to name names. But it was biased, because if you said anything that had to do with the left-wing agenda, even if it wasn't true, your tweets and your posts stayed up. Whereas if you actually came up with an opposite view, with a different view, even if your view was factual, as I have constantly for the last couple of months, I find that one of the social media groups are putting almost a knee-jerk reaction, putting something on my post which says that is, according to their independent fact checkers, I was spreading misinformation when I wasn't. And basically what they call independent fact checkers are not independent at all when you dig deep into it. But I know other people who were blocked and stopped, even going into people like Kelly McEnany, who was the White House press secretary, was banned from that. The New York Post was banned for putting up something that was factual. But this is the new world order you will get if you get the radical left taking over a Biden administration.
Right. And of course, it's only for our own good, right? Barry, in the last 2 minutes that we have, what do you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I just want to raise a point here about a couple of United Nations resolutions that has me deeply worried. There was a draft resolution just last week. There was another stab in the back for Israel, and it was approved just a few days ago on the 18th of November. This draft resolution has to do with Jewish homes in Judea and Samaria and our capital, Israel. And they belong, as if they belong to some non-existing country, and that Israel has no rights to our ancient land and our homes because of this resolution. And what worried me about this resolution, this draft resolution, which is going to go to the General Assembly, was passed with a majority of 156 to 6, would you believe? And the minority countries, apart from Israel, the United States and Canada, were tiny countries like the Marshall Islands, Micronesia, and Nauru. So why do these tiny Pacific islands seem to possess more common sense than all the European countries put together, or even Australia and New Zealand? And I ask again, did the diplomats approve the motion with or without reading the wording? Why? Because one of the words talk about sovereign rights and natural resources. For instance, natural resources to do with oil and natural gas, not to impede the Palestinian development and export of discovered oil and natural gas reserves. You tell me what discovered oil and natural gas reserves have been discovered by the Palestinians, either by Hamas or the PLO. But that was in the wording of this resolution. I'd love to know for any United Nations diplomat to tell me precisely where discovered Palestinian oil and natural gas reserves are located.
Right. You know what? It's hard to get the truth out today without being censored or laughed at or silenced by being called a racist. So we'll have to leave it there, Barry. We'll have you back on again, God willing, soon. Thank you so much for being with us. Again, go to Barry's website at theviewfromisrael.com and strategic-israel.org. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, and watch out for my prediction. Hopefully we won't need it, because hopefully Trump will somehow, through the Supreme Court, manage to hold on to his another 4 years.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Ben-Tekoa, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
right, we are back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and our next guest is Dr. Mordechai Ben-Menachem. He's a researcher, former lecturer at Ben-Gurion University, and has authored over 70 books and 400 research papers on science and history and more. He commentates on Mideast and world issues. Welcome to the show, Dr. Mordechai Ben-Menachem.
Thank you.
All right, so it's after the U.S. elections, and we're still waiting for the official announcement of who really won. I know a lot of people believe that they know who won, but there has been nothing official yet that has come out. So what do we know for certain about the aftermath of the U.S. elections, and what don't we know for certain?
Okay, first of all, the way you phrased things was superb. Thank you. We have to remember the first basic fact about elections in the United States. The media have no role in the elections. They do not decide it. They do not call it. They do not declare it. They have no role whatsoever. Elections are not decided by the media. The media does not affect it. The fact that they declared something is simply noise, nothing more. Second thing is, there exists a well-defined process of voting by law and by the Constitution. And that anyone who's interested can look up the 12th Amendment. It was passed at the very beginning of the 19th century when the founders, the framers of the Constitution were still alive and active. And it's short and it's very, very written very clearly. Anyone can look at it. Now, I'm just presenting some basic facts at the moment that everyone should be aware of because there's an enormous quantity of noise out there. The third thing is all the polls, every single poll that was published were all absolute lies. Total, nonsensical lies, intentional lies from the very beginning. I don't have history of polls in the United States. I have history of polls in Israel, which are equally liars. And I have 30 years of poll data that I can use to prove that the polls in Israel are lies, intentional lies, and all of the falsity was with a specific preemptive design. They were designed to influence the election illegally, by the way. And all these polls, these false polls, are actually against the law. The fourth point is there exists an executive order signed by the president in 2018, which declared a state of emergency in everything dealing with voting and everything dealing with elections in the United States. Very few people are aware of this executive order, but the importance of this executive order is that it gives the president legal standing to send in the military where it may be necessary, and I'll get back to that point in just a moment.
Yeah, you have to.
So this executive order exists, again, from 2018, just after the false scandal of the Russian accusations, and this executive order was used about 2 weeks ago by the Office of the President of the United States for an exclusive, I'm using careful terminology at the moment, an exclusive military team to go in and seize computer equipment at a site in Germany. Of this, I am reasonably certain. I have it from more than 3 sources. And also at a second site in Spain. Of this, I am less certain. I've only heard it from 2 sources. That belong to, ostensibly, some of these companies that I will list in a moment that were involved in the election in the United States. These servers contain evidence of fraud. We do not know the extent of this evidence or the extent of the fraud that they show. We do know that the server in Germany was at either a CIA facility or in the same building that houses a CIA safe house facility. In other words, and this is a final point on these issues that what I'm calling that we absolutely know about. We know that there's absolutely no doubt that there was election fraud in this election. We do not know how extensive it was. Apparently, and I use that word guardedly, apparently the fraud was very extensive, was massive. But I'm saying this is apparent, this is not clear. Let me go briefly down the names of some of the software and systems that were used that and some points about them. People are hearing these names and may not know what we're talking about. The first two names that people should be aware of are Hammer and Scorecard. Hammer and Scorecard are important because they were voting systems. They were not voting systems in the sense of the actual voter, but they were systems used developed by the CIA during the presidency of George Bush, the son, after 9/11, to influence voting in foreign countries. Remember, by law, the CIA is not allowed to operate within the United States, only against foreign entities. We know that in 2009, weeks after Obama being inaugurated, he removed Hammer and Scorecard from the CIA, set up a special department under the office of the President of the United States, under the White House, and these software packages were transferred in 2009 to the White House itself. We know that these packages were used against Israel in 2015. We do not know for certain whether they were used in the last three elections here in Israel, this series of three elections that we had within a year. But we have a fairly, how shall I say it? How shall I phrase this? A fairly high suspicion that Netanyahu did not lose these elections. Dominion, Skytel, and Smartmatic are three other software packages, or I should say systems. Dominion is more of a hardware system than a software package, but it includes software as well. Most of its software is heavily influenced by Skytel and Smartmatic. The important point here on these three names is that, A, we still do not know even today who are the owners of these companies. We know that they are not Americans. We do not know specifically who owns them. Apparently, again, I use that word very carefully, apparently, Smartmatic is owned by the Venezuelan government. Not exactly a friend of the United States or of the White House.
Right.
Skytel and Dominion. Skytel is officially listed as being a Spanish company. Dominion is listed as being a Canadian company. The server in Germany officially, apparently, again, I have this only from one source, so I'm saying apparently, Dominion, the server in Germany apparently was the property of Dominion. Again, this is only one source. I'm not certain of this. What were the fraud methodologies? It said we know for certainty that fraud was implemented. We do not know the extent of the fraud. We know for certainty that there was fraud. For instance, we know for certainty that there were many, many thousands of people who voted from the graves. We know of people, for instance, in Clark County, Nevada, which is the most populous county in the state of Nevada, whose date of birth is sometime in the middle of the 19th century. It's very unlikely that they voted.
Mordechai, we've come to the end. You only have about 60 seconds more. What would you like to leave us with?
Well, I in that amount of time, I can't really say a lot. What I can say is I can emphasize what I've said before. We know for certainty that fraud existed. We do not know for certainty the extent of the fraud, and I certainly cannot say will Trump's legal team prevail or not. I cannot predict What I can say is that there is a basis for suspicion. Clearly, this election was not just dirty, it was filthy.
Well, a lot of people agree with you, and hopefully all the American people, whether they're Democratic or Republican, will be able to know the truth, and it's important to know the truth so everyone has trust in the elections for next time as well. So thank you, Dr. Mordechai Ben-Menachem, for coming on the show and bringing out these points of what we do know and what we don't yet know, but hopefully we will know soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And everybody, you've been listening to the Tamar Yonah Show here at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. If you have any comments or questions about what we have been discussing on the show, feel free to write me, Tamar, Tamar, at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. And I want to say thank you again to all of our listeners and our supporters here at the station. Our voice is only able to reach you because of your support. And we so appreciate that. Go to our Wall of Fame, everybody. On our website, we have our Wall of Fame where you see the names of some of our biggest supporters there. And we so appreciate you. And if you would like to have your name with a medallion there, you can go to our website at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. And you can click on the donate button and read the instructions there, and we'll be happy to add you on. Thank you so much again for your support, and thank you, everybody, for listening in.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.